Hi guys, so today I want to talk about 9 books you will not regret reading in 2023. And this list is quite random actually. We have a lot of different books with different topics, different lengths, different complexity levels, as well as different subjects. So I think there is a book for everyone in this list. So let's start with Humankind. This book is an optimistic book. Basically, the author develops his premise that, humans are actually pretty selfless. We are not always born selfish, and he gives a lot of evidence in that regard. I think that if you need to restore your faith in humanity for 2023, this is a great book to get started. Or even if you consider yourself quite a pessimist, I think it will be pretty challenging and pretty fun to read an entire book, which is kind of trying to convince you that you should think differently. Of course, that as you read the book, you'll find out the author does a little bit of cherry picking to support his evidence better. Of course, he ends up kind of avoiding a few examples in order to do that, but either way, it's a really compelling read and I think you'll enjoy it. Secondly, we have The Venomous Lumpsucker, and this is the only fiction book on this list. While I wouldn't say that either the characters or the pace of the book are either its strongest points, I would say that it's in this list specifically because of its setting and its premise. Basically, The Venomous Lumpsucker is a little bit of a dystopian novel, and it creates this scenario where most of the economy revolves around extinguished animal species. And it also talks about the ties between corporations and governments in a world where the extinction of species is basically a very profitable endeavor for most companies. And it's basically a really frightening picture of what our future could look like. So in that sense, it's the complete opposite of the first book on this list. And I think that's why it's so good to read it after that one. Because you can read a pessimistic book and an optimistic book, and you'll have everything you need for 2023. In third place in this list, we have Meditations, and I think there isn't much to be said about Meditations anymore. It's such a famous book, and I think it can be considered like the father of all self-help books. It's basically a collection of writings, and it basically covers so many different areas of life and psychology and philosophy, values and principles. And I feel like every time I pick up that book and I open it randomly, I find such a great piece of advice in there. And the edition of Meditations you see on the screen is actually my favorite edition. And that's because in this English version, the writing style was adapted and simplified as much as possible, which makes it a very digestible book. On a completely different note, we have Atomic Habits. I've been talking about Atomic Habits for years now. I think it's one of the Bibles of self-improvement and productivity books. And if you still haven't read it, 2023 is the year you need to read it ASAP. This book provides a really clear methodology to get things done, to get started with your habits, to get rid of bad habits. What I love about this book in general is that it is very clear in the step-by-step process you need to take. It doesn't just provide you with anecdotal evidence, it doesn't just provide you with stories from the author, it gives you really concise insights which are very easy to follow and understand. Next on our list, we have Man's Search for Meaning. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This was written in 1946 after the author experienced life in a concentration camp after World War II. And Man's Search for Meaning is quite an optimistic book, maybe the king or the father of all optimistic books. And that's because after his experiences, the author argues that there is actually meaning in every situation in life, even in extreme situations. You can find the meaning, you can find the purpose to do better and be a better human being. Also, it's an incredibly humbling book, and after reading it, you'll kind of feel like your problems aren't really problems at all, and that there is always room and there's always space for improvement and to be a better human in general. And back into the topic of productivity, we have The Organized Mind. I also have a full video on this book, and the author basically explains how our brain processes information, how it breaks down all of the stimulus, all of the information that we end up collecting in our day-to-day, due to the fact that we live in the age of information. And more than that, this book actually teaches you and shows you that you can get control of your time, your home, and your tasks. And it gives you really practical examples to show you how you can do it. And in order to do this, the book will talk about focus, attention, and how your brain actually memorizes the information. Then these key concepts are kind of transported into a more practical guide that actually shows you how you can actually manipulate your brain to process information the way you want it to process information. Next in our list, we have The Psychology of Money, and this is quite the recent read for me. I actually finished reading it 2 weeks ago. So The Psychology of Money basically teaches you about the fundamentals of money management from a psychology perspective. So what happens in our human brain when we want to save, when we want to invest, and when we want to spend money. And although The Psychology of Money doesn't really provide you with any new, incredible new ideas, and it kind of revisits the principles of money making and money management that most of us are already aware of, it provides a really nice summary. It's a really short and easy read, and if you know nothing about personal finances yet, I think it's a great book to get started because it will give you the information you need not to know exactly what you should be doing with your money, but the kind of mindset you should be using when making those decisions. Next on our list, we have Essential Jung. And while some of the things you're going to read in here are quite old-fashioned, they at least provide you with the history of a lot of what we know as modern psychology today. If you are curious about where a lot of things that we use nowadays come from in terms of, its foundations in the psychology field, like archetypes, introversion, extroversion, this is a great book because it compiles Carl Jung's original texts in a way that makes sense and that really shows you how he worked through his information, how he was opposing to Freud in some instances and other professors at the time. And it's a really, really interesting read, even if you do not agree with some of his ideas. Finally, we have Getting Things Done, and this is a classic once again in the productivity field because it shows you kind of a consistent and concise way for you to get things done. So get things organized and clarified and organize them into list format. However, I really do not want to get too in-depth about getting things done, and that's because there's a full video about this system that really breaks down everything in the book, and it's going to be released next week. And you can actually learn with all of these books I've just mentioned without actually owning their physical copies and just learn when you're on and about with your everyday life. Just imagine this. Every time you hear a new snippet of one of these books, you get better at managing your money, getting more productive, understanding more about the human mind, and so much more. And this happens whether you can dedicate 5 minutes of your attention when taking the trash outside or 1 hour during your commute. And that's what you can do if you sign up for Audible, who is kindly sponsoring today's video. Audible has an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, but he really likes self-improvement, and their library of audiobooks is huge. As an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. Members also get full access to a growing selection of included audiobooks, Audible originals, and podcasts. And you can download or stream their included titles all you want. So to start changing your life in 2023, new members can try it for free for 30 days, so visit audible.com/Mariana or text Mariana to 500-500. Once again, it's audible.com/Mariana or text Mariana to 500-500. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thank you for being here in 2022, and I'll see you next year. Bye guys!